Okay, welcome guys to another episode in this interview series. It has been quite a while since our last video, of course, with Tux, but I'm now here with Alex Langusch, I believe,
Yep.
and or better known as MAGIK, the coach of Team Immunity. How are you doing today, Alex?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Pretty chill. How are you?
Yeah, things have been great so far. Of course, a lot to talk about in your career so far as a coach of Team Immunity. Pretty recent development, however, plenty to cover. I want to talk a little bit, though, of course, about your beginning as a player. Sort of starting in those CSS era of Counter Strike, or the iteration of that game, rather. How were you first introduced to the game?
So the first thing that I probably did was go to a local LAN cafe with a mate. His brother used to play 1.6. At the time, Counter Strike Source was out, so we used to go there. Played a lot of 1v1 Scouts Knives. We played a lot of 1v1 Surf, so that's pretty much how I got involved. And I loved surfing, loved flying around, and we pretty much just went to this LAN cafe that was pretty local to us all the time. So just tell the parents, we're going out, gonna, get some fresh air, whatever, and we just hop down to the LAN cafe and play there for 6 hours and then come home.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it took me a while to get my own PC, my own Steam and everything like that, but yeah, it's pretty good.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's been a part of a lot of people's history as well, myself included.
Yeah.
LAN cafe culture is definitely important or lots of fun. I also want to talk about your name as a player. Or as a coach as well. MAGIK. Does it have
Yep.
any sort of origin? Where does it come from?
Um, well, back in the day, pretty much had a lot of random aliases, and I don't know, I just sort of ended up on Magic, and it was all lowercase, and I was in a 32-man Dust 2 server, and I saw this guy called, I think it was Hunter,
Okay.
and his name was like all in caps, and he had R's like all across the screen. I was like, wow, he was like top frag, and I was like, this is a sick guy. I want to be like him, so I just put all Magic all in caps, had K's all across the screen, and yeah, that's how sort of it started.
There you go. Very interesting indeed, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, everyone has a tale behind their name, and of course, it's always interesting to hear about it. Tapping a little bit more now into sort of your competitive experience, how's your first interactions? Did it ever get competitive at all for Counter Strike Source, or how did things start over there?
Um, as I said, I was real into surf. I just love the feeling of flying around with a shotgun, and I sort of started in a few. They were like sort of surf teams back in the day for
Right.
combat surf, and we played like 5v5 scrims, like 2v2s. We had like practice. We had like strats.
Wow.
We played like in an American comp with like 300 ping, and we thought we were the best. Um,
Uh,
and so that was pretty much it. And then what happened is a lot of the surf guys started playing more. It was called like vanilla Counter Strike in like
right.
back in the day. They started playing a lot of pugs, a lot of stuff like that, and I sort of got introduced through that. And I sort of played a few pugs, few 10-mans, and yeah, I played a lot of Blood Assault. So that's sort of how my aim started shaping up, just playing Blood Assault all day.
Mm.
Because I didn't really have like I don't know, I couldn't really work the browser system, was a bit of a noob, so I just played Blood Assault and my favorites.
Yeah, well, generally in that around that time, of course, is when CS:GO, released and things
Yep.
started to pick up for it in terms of like a competitive title. Uh, where did things get for you as a player at that point? Of course,
Um,
yeah. Let's see where that went.
I sort of played Source all the way until it like really died because I was still surfing. I
Right.
did a lot of hours in B Hop, like I was just having a great time. And then I sort of started realizing like, hey, there's this big competition. Like I heard about NIP and like started looking at the Australian teams, looking at Cybergamer. So I sort of came across the CS:GO maybe like a year after it had been out. So I was pretty late to the game. And yeah, just looked on CG, sort of said, hey, anyone keen to make a team or, play MM or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how it started pretty much for me, trying to get into CSGO and competitive side of it.
Okay, and of course you would have played in a couple of teams early on.
Yeah,
Uh,
yep.
Tell me about a bit of them.
So probably the first team actually ended up having quite a few known players. So I made a thread like looking for players, whatever. And then there were these two guys from Call of Duty, COD 4 players that were saying like, oh, we're new to CSGO, like, we want to join a team. And so those two players were actually Mizu and Dezabel. At the time, they were in a COD 4 team together, so I sort of had them under my wing. We picked up some other sort of COD 4 dudes. We played a lot of like MM at like the DMG level. Sort of got some scrim stuff like that, and yeah. And then in turn, I actually played a lot of COD 4 scrims with them, just having fun and running around.
Okay.
So it was kind of fun. But yeah, it's funny how those two guys sort of ended up like they're both obviously in good teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so CS:GO having a couple of teams here and there. As an individual, though, what kind of roles did you like to play? Like, how in your mind was Counter-Strike best played for you?
For me, I always sort of became the in-game leader from the get-go, really. I sort of, and also an entry fragger. So I always just played MM and always just loved going in first, just doing my own thing, sort of getting those opening frags. So I always sort of became the entry fragger through that. And then just the way I think and just my analytical nature sort of just led myself to being more of an in-game leader and studying the game a bit better. And I always was the one who made the teams as well. So I would always recruit everyone, and that sort of, if you take that sort of captain role, you sort of feel more inclined to be the in-game leader as well.
Yeah, of course.
They sort of go hand in hand sometimes. Yeah. So that's sort of how I was. I was always an entry fragger / in-game leader.
Okay, so a little bit of history repeating itself, perhaps, with your sort of analytical background coming into what you do here today. But I want to sort of tap into that a little bit more. Like, what sort of sparked you to move away from playing and start saying, okay, maybe coaching is where I want to be?
For me, it was more of a time factor. So,
okay,
I of course I was always an in-game leader, but sometimes I just felt a bit not mechanically sloppy, but just slower reaction times or just getting a bit distracted, zoning in and out. So I sort of felt that if I could be more removed, perhaps, and if I had, like, I was always sort of in a position where I knew that the players I had weren't mechanically strong enough, or there were other aspects of their game that let them down or something, and that I sort of was always just the in-game leader to say, let's just like focus on our individual game until we're at the level that, we can dual flusher or like take one-on-ones against the best. There's no point overthinking the game too much, because individually and mechanically, that's probably the biggest weakness. You know what I mean? So, and that sort of caused a lot of fights for me with other teammates sometimes who were more like, let's do all the strats, let's do all of these sorts of things. So I sort of just, when my last team finished, sort of had a look around and couldn't find too much, and so I thought I'll try and become a coach or an analyst for a team. Otherwise, I'll just play casually and just see if any offers came up. And yeah, that's sort of how it started. But being a coach as well, you sort of have different time schedules because you do a lot of work outside of prac hours.
Right.
So that leads me to be, like, obviously I try and attend every practice that I can, but it leads me more time. Like the practice won't stop if I'm not there, if that makes sense.
Right.
So the guys can still play, they can still work on things. I can set them drills or things to think about, and they can go off and do that, and then, yeah. So it gives me more free time in those sorts of hours as well.
And yeah, I suppose that flexibility has sort of helped you so far?
Yeah, exactly. Sort of lets me really come to the table, not having to think about playing as well.
Right.
Like, I can think of a lot of different other aspects of the game, and because I'm dealing with mechanically skilled individuals who I feel like a lot of them can take on those one-on-ones with JW, Flusher, like those top aimers. That yeah, it leads me. I can now think about these things realistically, if that makes sense, rather than just before just thinking about the game, sort of just for my own benefit.
Right. Well, having those sort of coaching experiences sort of led you into that adventure with Team Immunity. I want to talk a little bit about how that first started. Where did you first get into contact with Team Immunity, and where did it all start?
Yeah, so I sort of thought that, yeah, I'd be more of an analyst, and I felt like I'd really be strong at reviewing opponents and sort of knowing how to counter certain setups, certain things like that. So I contacted Bern, Are You Okay? And Greatest Faction. I'd known them for quite a while. Been, versed them a lot of times. So I sort
Right.
of messaged them, said, hey, would you guys be interested in having an analyst? I'm happy to do anything. I just want some experience. I was even thinking of being an analyst for some overseas teams,
Okay.
and working under a couple of coaches internationally. Because again, you don't need to be there for every practice, so time zone's not as important of a factor. But yeah, I thought if I could get some domestic experience, it would be really good for international or whatever I desired. So I sort of contacted these guys. Um, I put together like a little demo of some of the sort of stats and sort of things that I could do and analyze and communicate. And then they sort of took that away, had a chat between each other and the rest of their teammates, and they sort of said, "Yeah, come on board. We'll see how you go." So yeah, that's sort of how it started. And then I did like a lot of demo watching, a lot of analyzing for their
Right.
first game that they had it was against Darksided of all people. But Darksided had just changed a player, so it sort of, and it was the in-game leader. They got Dick Stacey instead of Bass, and so it sort of threw all of the stuff that I had watched and seen out the window a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I still talked about like individual tendencies, what to look for, how to, respond, what they should be thinking about. And when I watched the game, I think they lost both maps or something. But I saw a lot of other issues that were sort of more, that should be prioritized a bit more rather than
Right.
countering opponents, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And that sort of talks about, like, that sort of leads me into my next question as well,
yeah,
because, you have this introduction with the community, a few online games here and there, with CGPL and Zen League going on at that time. And then we reach a stage of CGPL Autumn 2017. So this land final comes underway, Immunity are partaking in it, and this is your first event as a coach. So,
yeah.
you talked about these sort of aspects on an individual level or as a team or countering your opponents. I'm interested to know, what sort of aspects did you focus on the most, like when you came into this very first tournament with the team?
So for me, the biggest problem that I saw with the team was the environment and a lack of trust between the players, and that sort of caused them a lot of in-game issues. And that's one thing that I really tried to work on from the start, and making sure that they were all mentally coherent and together and resilient. So that was the main thing that I worked on coming into that LAN. It was only a short period before that I joined, so I didn't have too much time to sort of implement any framework or anything like that. But of course, I did a bit of looking at other teams, thinking about things they might do.
Yep.
So we went in pretty prepared. It was just on the day.
Yeah.
And at this time as well, I was doing a lot of just watching. So obviously, it takes quite a while to watch a game of CS, 45 minutes to an hour. So to get a good sample size of seeing how someone plays a certain map could take, a month or 2 months even.
Yeah.
Even like cracking 4 nights a week, because you need a sample, like a good sample size to really see how a team plays. So I was very quiet at this point. I was just watching, just seeing how they interacted, sort of the ideas and things like this. So even coaching that event, I was very quiet, very reserved as well. Still getting used to the whole idea of where I sat in the hierarchy of leadership as well. Yeah.
Okay. And obviously coming into this, did you have any sort of previous experience, as an analyst or a coach that sort of helped you understand these nuances a bit better?
Not really, to be honest. So before this, I'd never really done any coaching or anything like that. Pretty much just in-game leading in my teams.
Yeah.
It's the only sort of thing that I had in terms of that. Being a captain in some sports stuff, so it's all pretty similar. But yeah,
Yeah.
no real coaching experience or things like that.
Okay. And of course, during that tournament, you guys play second to Avantgarde. Was there any sort of things that you picked up on perhaps after that tournament, or what you could see with the roster at that time?
Um, it was still that sense of mm, like that they not didn't trust each other, but there was no on the day like they all performed pretty averagely. So
Okay.
it didn't help that when you perform online really well and then you go to a LAN, and things just not clicking. Like there's not much you can do on the day. So we didn't take too much away from it, um, but there were some issues in the team at the time that sort of really reared their head over that event.
Right. And of course, I suppose after this event, things sort of changed a little bit for Immunity. I mean, that was a moment where James sort of left the roster, and then
Yep.
I believe Destiny and Wizard sort of came in bits and pieces here and there. And this is where you guys managed to qualify for the PGL Asian Minor, and
Yes, yes.
yeah, so using Destiny on the online portion of that, and then having Wizard come in. I want to talk first and foremost about Wizard and what his environment was like. Bringing him into the team or into the fold for this tournament.
Sure. So we use Mark for the online part of the qualifier, and Mark's like Destiny. Sorry, he's a really amazing sub, slots in really well, really
Yeah.
high impact player. So yeah, he was really good over that whole qual. He really helped us to qual. It was really like he's very calm, very good comms. A lot of input in how we should approach rounds if we start losing or winning or anything like that. So he was really good. And then for personal reasons, he couldn't attend the minor with us. So we had to think about who we could use, and we decided we would use Wizard. So he started practicing. We didn't get a lot of practice time with him. We only really had probably a good week of scrims, a week and a half of scrims. So we didn't get quite like as many maps as we wanted before the event. But in terms of the online portion of when we had Wizard, he was very calm, sort of slotted into the role really well, held his own CT, held his own on T. Again, like Mark, he had like good input into rounds, and he was filling the void really well of that cool, calm, collected fifth that we needed, to be honest, to go with the strong four core. Because that's sort of the role that James was in, being our in-game leader. He was sort of that middle of the pack player. CT side, could play anywhere. And Wizard was performing online like that, and he was fulfilling that role really well.
Yeah, well, it certainly did pick up some performance on the team, because you guys managed to break out of the group second, defeating the Mongols on 2 occasions of which. And during this group stage process, of course, the top 2 teams making it to that playoff bracket had a night to prepare. So there was sort of that gap, between day 1 and day 2, and of course, moving on to the playoff bracket, defeating Flash Gaming 2-0, and then going the distance with Renegades, only just falling short there, 1-2-2. So I want to talk about these sort of things first. With a small period to recuperate, what things were you doing with the team in order to prepare for these finals?
So you're talking about before Flash or after?
Before Flash.
So so we had all the group stage on the first day, which was where we faced Mongols first up. Before this, we'd obviously prepared for Mongols. We sort of had a good feeling of which map we would play. They actually played a lot better than I was expecting, to be honest.
Okay.
But they faced a lot of issues that they had when I'd watched them, and we took advantage of that. And I think we just played our own game really well. Then we played Tyloo on Inferno, and we got stomped. And we knew how they were going to play, but knowing and playing against it are 2 very different things. And when I rewatched that game, like they were so prepared for us. They were really ready. And then we versed Mongols again, and we got the 2-0, beat them on their map, and then we picked same map that we'd beaten them on previously, and yeah, just felt like a good first day. Even though we lost to Tyloo, we felt like we would have a better chance next time we played them. Um, so yeah, and then we played Flash the next day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's sort of what I
the
wanted
next day, yeah.
to look at as well. Like, I mean,
Yep.
there were a few hours, you know, between that time. Was anything
Yeah.
really done, or was it sort of just to, cool down a bit and get back into the next day fresh
It
minded?
was, yeah, it was a little bit of a cool down. We did have a good chat about what maps we wanted to play. Like, we already had an idea, but we had a more of a chat about the maps that we were going to play against Flash and how we wanted to. We went into the game against Flash with more of a game plan than on day one.
Right.
How we wanted to approach rounds and stuff like that, but what we noticed straight away is that Flash had been watching us like really hard, because
Okay.
I think that first Inferno map we were down like 8-1 or 8-0 even, and we were just getting hard counter stratted of how we were holding on CT. And so I think I called a pause and I was like, guys, like they're reading you. You got to play different positions. Like try and think about playing the same style, but just mix it up a little bit. So we started doing that, and then we came back, and then T side we played really solidly, and it was a really close game. We won 2 force buys on 14-14 and
Mm.
15-14, so that was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good first map on Inferno, and then Overpass we just felt pretty confident, to be honest.
Yeah. Well.
Because
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, I'd watched them play like quite a few Overpass. I sort of knew how they thought about the map. I knew sort of the positioning, and yeah, we sort of had the number a bit, and then got the 2-0, which was really good.
Well, yeah, that was something I sort of wanted to tap into as well because,
Yep.
of course, Flash Gaming sort of blitzed their group. I mean, coming out of their Group A top seed, and then you
Yep.
guys grabbing that 2-0 victory over them. I wanted to know, is this a case of Immunity sort of overperforming this team? Or outperforming, I should say, rather. Or is it more of a case of Flash underperforming at the day?
I think Flash were a little bit overrated coming into the
Right.
event. They hadn't played too many online matches or anything like that. Obviously, they beat Renegades 16-6 on Cobble. I knew they had a pretty strong Cobble. We didn't want to play them on that. And I think that they didn't have too many like games online, so people just sort of thought of them as a top Chinese team without them being tested. I think, and I think we really did test them.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was really apparent, like when we were playing them, that they had like resources. They'd watched us. They were prepared. But we were out aiming them for sure, which made life a lot easier as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well,
So yeah,
taking away that 2-0 victory obviously puts you guys in the upper bracket final.
Yep.
You squared off against Renegades and really took it to them. I mean, you showed that you could, you know, battle with the best of the overseas Australians. And,
yeah.
I want to know, like, at the beginning of all this, did the team ever feel like they could take it to them? Or was there ever any concerns about the performances of these players?
I feel like so we watched over our Flash games that night. We sort of
Right.
talked about the things that we could work on, and then we talked about Renegades, sort of how we wanted to approach it. But I don't know, we felt really calm and really sort of like we were going to win, and we didn't over prepare. And I don't know. And then we came into that first map against Renegades. We got like slaughtered. It was on train.
Mm.
Our T side was really disjointed. We weren't doing what we'd practiced. Like people were missing smokes, and we weren't playing as a team at all. And we got wrecked, and we had a really good chat outside about things that we had to think about going into Nuke. And we started the CT side, which was like a blessing because our CT side Nuke is like really strong. So it was really good, and we found our rhythm really well. But yeah, and then on the final map, we got crushed again on Mirage.
Right.
Just fell away. Just I think mentally, like they just like outperformed us. They were just really they were prepared as well for us, and we didn't. I don't know. We didn't really think that they would be. I think they played their own game really well, and they were really sharp. They had really like nice aim, nice crossfires.
Yeah.
It was a bit funny because on the stage you could, because the coach didn't have noise cancelling headset, so I could sort of hear their comms a bit when they were like loud and hyped.
Right.
And they were commenting that like, because obviously I can't talk to my team, but they were commenting that our players were out in spots, and those sorts of players hadn't seen them at all. So, and when I watch their demos, they just play really good information and then pick together and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
we weren't ready for like how they played, I think.
Okay, so
But on Nuke, we just held our spots and played well.
So in this instance,
Yep.
you know, falling to them 1-2, do you think to get you guys over that line, was it a matter of playing to your own game stronger, or sort of playing to Renegades' weaknesses better? What do you think was the case here?
We had to definitely play train a lot stronger than we did.
Yeah.
And I think on Mirage as well, we had to play a lot more of our game, a lot stronger. Not as scared as well, not as one by one. I think if we gripped up more, might have been better because, I don't know, we just got punished by like individual plays by them all the time. It was really when we should be the ones punishing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if that happens too much, you just get real disheartened. And that was a thing that I noticed with the team.
Okay. And you've brought it up a few times here, of course, as well, train being a little bit difficult of a map for you guys. I was interested, what was the thought process to actually pick train? Because obviously Overpass was still on the cards at that point, and you had quite a good history on that. So where does that come from?
Well, obviously we saw Chiefs take it to them hardcore on train at IEM, and we sort of thought domestically, like, we match up pretty well against Chiefs. I knew that we'd always struggled T-side on train. I don't know, we sort of just, in our minds, just skipped Overpass for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. Just on the day, like, none of us even thought about it, like picking it, or I don't know.
Yeah, well,
it was very weird. We thought about it after. We're like, why didn't we pick Overpass? Or, but I to be honest, I don't think it would have mattered too much. I think it would have been a pretty similar result.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, especially with Chiefs having that dominant performance at IEM Sydney on train, you know, there's definitely that sort of success by association sort of thing. So
correct. Even though Renegades at that point were really new two players, now they're really established, played a lot of online matches against good teams. So I think we should have thought about our pick a little more at the time. But yeah, I don't know. None of us thought of us.
Yeah, well, it wasn't over for you guys just yet at that moment in the tournament. Of course, moved down into the lower side of the bracket where you played Tyloo. This is where things became pretty one-sided. I mean, with this, you know, with a strong performance so far in the tournament, what was it that made this game such a one-sided affair?
We'd heard a lot that Flash wrecked Tyloo in all their practices and everything, so we really thought that we were going to be facing Flash, so we didn't prepare too much for Tyloo.
Yeah,
which was probably a mistake, because obviously we played them previously on Inferno, so we didn't want to play Inferno again. So they got to pick Mirage, which we're not that strong on, as like we got wrecked by Renegades. And I don't know, I saw the team crumble a bit mentally as well. I think losing to Renegades in the fashion that we did, even though we got a map, I think they just weren't mentally back ready to play CS.
right.
And to play another best of 3 against like a really sharp team. And the thing with Tyloo is that once they start winning, like, it's very hard to come back. Like, you saw how many force buys they won. It's like 14 in the series against Renegades. Like, if they have like heaps of utility, they use it really well, they play really well together, and they just crush you. And they had the whole crowd behind them, they got really hyped. They just hard out aimed us, to be honest, on the day. And there's not much you can do when you're getting out aimed and outplayed.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned there as well about sort of the mentality or the environment around the team at that time. Tell me a little bit more about that. How were the players feeling, you know, during this series?
We'd had a couple problems with Wizard in terms of mentally just changing how he was talking about the game and playing in game compared to how he'd been online. So I think that was affecting some of the guys, but it was just the Tyloo factor, I guess.
Right.
Just them getting not loud, but like them just aiming and just always being up in your face. If you show any sort of weakness, they'll capitalize. And I had a really good chat to the Tyloo coach and the Tyloo manager, and they were saying that if we hadn't picked Overpass, they were going to pick Overpass. Like they were so ready for us that.
Wow.
Yeah. So we sort of we were getting played from the start.
Okay, and that sort of brings up my next point as well. I mean, especially being the Asian minor, you played a lot of, predominantly teams from Asia.
Yep.
Did you notice, especially from your perspective as a coach, what the differences were as opposed to, your Oceanic opponents?
Yeah, sure. The main thing that I've noticed is that all of these teams have really clear structures and systems. So they all 5 players are on the same page of how the team wants to play, how they want to approach rounds, sort of who's doing what and why, and it's really clear, and you can see it in their rotations and how they move around together and how they react as well. It's very quick in terms of tempo. So as soon as something happens, they're all moving, not just one guy reacting, or Whereas in Australia and this is on CTNT, so in Australia you just get players who just play their position or they play with their closest teammate in a crossfire. But the Asian teams sort of treat CT as like another side where all 5 of them are on the same page and they all have a goal as a team.
Right.
Which I think makes their CT sides really strong, especially Tyloo. And it's really hard to predict who's playing where or who's doing what by the way that they play. So that's probably one thing. And then obviously the up in your face sort of mentality that Tyloo have. Flash were very different though. They have a very different style than Tyloo.
Okay. Tell me a bit about that. How's the differences there?
Flash sort of play a lot more back, so they give you a lot more room to get into your groove and play your game. So like against Flash, obviously we got rolling a bit easier, a bit more. In terms of their CT side, and they play really smart crossfires, and they do it in a way that you're not sure if they're there the next round or not. Like they throw the same utility or they don't throw any utility, so you have to be very careful. But their rotations just aren't as fast,
right?
And you can get up in their face, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
A lot of the Asian teams all have the same sort of retake mentality of just flooding the site and throwing really nice flashbangs. And the thing that Tyloo do is they do it so fast that there's like 4 of them on you, whereas Flash do it a bit more one by one, and you can sort of we did a really good job of getting up and stopping that flood from happening.
Right. So it's
giving ourselves time.
Yeah, more of a question of efficiency rather than doing the same things, just being efficient at it.
And and the tempo is just a bit different, which we were more accustomed to. They played more of a default style. So yeah, it was just a bit easier for us, to be honest. The style was better.
Yeah. So, of course, being defeated by Tyloo, I want to know a little bit about the team and how they were feeling, especially. It's a bit of a heartbreak as well about coming so far and then falling just short of the end there. Tell me a little bit about that.
Obviously, we had 2 chances to make it to Poland in the offline major qualifier, so that was pretty tough. The first time losing to Renegades and then losing to Tyloo, having 2 chances sort of makes it twice as bad.
Yeah.
But I think the guys sort of realized that with the amount of time that we had and the unstable 5th, like not having a lot of time to work with him, that it was a really good result.
Yeah.
That we'd beaten Mongols, we sort of expected to win, but the way they played was a lot better, and so the wins felt a lot better, if that makes sense.
Of course.
Obviously, if you walk over a team, it doesn't feel as good. And then Flash getting the 2-0, winning those 2 force buys in crucial rounds, like getting a lot of clutches, like the guys felt really good. When you get stomped by Tyloo or like lose 2 maps to Renegades getting stomped, you sort of forget about the loss. because it's so quick. Like
Yeah.
it's just over before you even really shoot anyone or see anyone. So we were actually really happy with the third place. Yeah, we were stoked, to be honest. I don't think anyone was feeling too down.
That's really good. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is a sort of a topic I want to talk about as well as PGL as just a whole for the Asian minor. You know, all throughout the tournament, something that I sort of picked up on was Immunity utilised, you know, their pause functions very well. Even coming to that 30th round, if you had the chance to use it, you'd use it. So, what was the thought process behind that?
Pretty much that. Like you have 4 pauses, you may as well use them.
Right.
Winning, losing, obviously, you want to. I sort of had the mentality that you want to use your pauses before you have to.
Okay.
So be proactive about it. Talk about things before they happen rather than after they happen. So rather than being 7-0 down, you're only 4-0 down. Although I like for me, I like to get the game going. So I like to have at least 9 rounds before we pause.
Okay.
And then you sort of, because it's only 30 seconds. It goes really quick. So I don't know. We sort of used them. I think we did use them pretty well. We used them when we had to. We talked about the things that were most important. And we sort of, after the first day, I was really strict. Because before this, other players had sort of been calling a pause or there was a bit of confusion. Like, should we call a pause? Like, I don't know. So I made it really clear after the first day, like, don't call a pause unless I say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that helped as well.
Okay. And obviously the format for the pauses. So to familiarize people a little bit, the coach is not allowed to communicate with the players whatsoever in the Valve rule set until these pauses come in, which you have 4 per game, and it's 30 seconds. So I want to get your input on this format. Obviously, there have been systems in the past where the coach can talk to the team continuously, or maybe you have a minute and a half or 2 minutes to pause, those sort of things. How do you feel about this system, the Valve system of pauses?
In terms of not talking to your team in general, it's like really hard.
Yeah.
I was getting told to be quiet a lot by the guy. Just because you feel compelled to talk when you see things, like you want to speak, if that makes sense. So it is hard. We practiced a bit online with me not saying as many things, which was helpful. But I actually like the system. I think maybe 45 seconds or a minute would be better, because if you only have 30 seconds, I can only really say something, and it doesn't give them time to respond and then me to respond. It's really like I'll say something and then they have to just like accept it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interpret it as they will, sort of thing.
Correct. It doesn't give me time to clarify much or talk about the next 2 or 3 rounds. It really only lets me talk about the immediate round ahead, or something like that, if that makes sense. But I think 4 pauses is the way to go. I think having 4 and not necessarily 2 per half. I think having 4 in general is like pretty good. And as well, the rule is you can't have 2 at once. Like you can't have a minute as your pause. But I think 4 breaks the game up pretty well. Obviously, you have the other teams 4 if they choose. As well, obviously, you can talk in the other team's pause. But in terms of time-wise, I had to be really, really clear and really direct about what I wanted to say.
Yeah, it's almost like a game in of itself, sort of thing, with the pausing system. But even in saying that, obviously the duration of 30 seconds, you'd like it to be 45 seconds, a bit longer.
It just gives the players that time to react, and you can react again.
Absolutely. And I suppose there's the other end of that spectrum as well, in the sense that what if the pauses, were like sort of 5 minutes? Is that when things sort of get a bit out of hand? What point for you is like, okay, this is too much?
I think 5 minutes is like you forget
it's like an eternity, right?
At that point. Yeah, that's a lot. If around time's only a minute 55. I'd say 2 minutes is probably the max you would ever have a pause for.
Right.
Maybe a minute and a half even. Like when you're getting to the pause being as long as a round, yeah, I don't know. Some other systems where you have like 3 minutes and you can use it up however you see fit are interesting. But I like the 4 pause. Like the amount of pauses is good, I think.
Yeah, I suppose it also keeps the competitiveness of it together as well.
Yeah,
So,
you don't lose that hype between the teams of it's a close round. Like if you have a minute and a half, even 2 minutes, you sort of forget like that it's so close.
yeah.
And it breaks the momentum up too much as well for a winning team.
Exactly, and that was such a profound aspect, especially a couple of years ago, where even on the global scale, a team will just take a pause, not because they have anything to say, but just to break the momentum. So
yeah, just kick out your friend's monitor cable or something like that. Take the old the old tech pause.
All right, so I've got a couple more questions here relating to the PGL Minor, a little bit more of a side topic sort of thing, but I want to talk a little bit about Bntet as a player because he has very high statistics. A lot of people seem to really like the way that he plays and how effective he is as an individual. I just want to get your perspective on this as both as a coach and as just general opinions as him as an individual and experiencing him in a tournament as an opponent.
Okay. So obviously we watched every game at the minor as well.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. And I watched Tyloo before this. But Bntet does a really good job of cleaning up. So he gets a really good rating and really good stats. He gets a lot of frags because he cleans up. So a lot of, like the Tyloo system is 2 guys will go in and try and trade it out. And he'll just be that third guy to clean up those players that have 40 health or 30 health or whatever are left.
Yeah.
So I noticed a lot of even small things with Tyloo where all of their players are M4A4. They all spray a lot. They all pre-fire heaps. And it's to get that damage in. So Bntet does a really good job of cleaning up. He has really good spray control. I think he's one of the best spray control M4A4 players in the whole region, to be honest. And he does a really good job of transferring his spray between 2-3 players, and he's always in a multi-frag position as well.
Right.
So he's always up on truck at A on overpass, or he's at barrels at B on overpass. He's always sort of that third player. T side he plays a bit different, but CT is where he has his most impact. He's always on Mirage. He's always the third guy retaking from CT on CT side. Like he just gets those mop-up frags, whereas the other Tyloo players sort of get more in your face, and you sort of don't notice Bntet is the one killing you. It's not them, if that makes sense. So the up-close players do a lot of the work for him, and they support him. So they're always playing around him and making sure he's in a good spot and everything like that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think he's an amazing player. But I think he plays the Tyloo system really well, and he's that sort of key fragger that they need. Like he always gets 2 kills if they're coming to his bomb site, 2 or 3 easily every round. It was amazing.
So you would say probably appropriate level of status for how he competes?
I don't want to say like overrated, but he's very good. Like he's like an amazing player, and he plays the role that he's meant to play really well. Okay. But yeah, people don't notice that sometimes. Yeah, he's just cleaning up those 40 HP players, so it's not a fair 1-on-1 a lot of the time. Yeah. But he always gets 2 or 3 on entry.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, stepping back a little bit now as well, back to on, MAGIK as an individual. I want to know, with immunity and the, at being such a prestigious organization and all these high level players and those sort of things, many people can be affected by that pressure of, stepping into big shoes, I suppose you could say. I want to know, did this have any sort of effect on you, or at any part during your tenure with Immunity?
Um, I've obviously it's been 2 events. I learned heaps at this last event about how I should, because I had a good chat to some of the other coaches there, so I got a really good idea of the sort of things that I should be saying and how I can say them better. So it didn't affect me too much. Obviously, I'm removed from the game. I'm not in the game, so the mental aspect doesn't bother me as bad as if I was playing. At Adelaide, I was probably a bit reserved, but at the minor, definitely opened up a lot more. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so I haven't felt too much pressure or anything like that.
Okay, that's good. And all right, so now I want to sort of talk a little bit about Counter-Strike today. So, these things have happened, they're in the past, and now talking about, things on the horizon here for yourself and furthermore Immunity. So, as it stands, as far as I'm aware, things, your fifth is a little bit uncertain about how things sort of sit around with the team. Despite all that though, I just want to know from your perspective, with Wizard, of course, substituting in for the minor and his performance, how did you think he performed as an individual in this team?
I think in terms of his playing, he played really well.
Yep.
It was just more a few things that he sort of said or pulled players around too much that online wouldn't get pulled into certain positions, and it sort of upset the flow of our game sometimes.
Yeah.
So we just decided as a team that after the go for a different player that sort of fulfilled more of the role that we were looking for. We have a player in mind, so we contacted a few. Some we trialed for a bit, some we didn't. But I think at the moment we've got a pretty good player that we're thinking of bringing in. Really solid, really calm. A player that people might not have thought that we would have gone for.
Okay.
But yeah, we're looking forward to the future with him. I think his attitude seems good. Obviously, after the first event, we'll know if he's a keeper or not that we use him for. But yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, well, certainly many other things exciting on the horizon as well. Zen League coming up, the finals in which you guys place first in your group for the Australian sort of conference. And so you will be joining, Darksided, MVP, PK, and Rekka in these this 2-day finals. And of course, you guys will be using Cozeh, I believe, from Vox. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that is correct. So we had some problems with the roster locks of Zen. We didn't really want to use James. And we had Cozeh on our roster at the time because before I came in, he was sort of doing some coaching every now and again, sort of helping them out or subbing and stuff like that. So we thought, hey, he's a player, he's good, he's going to fulfill that sort of pack in the middle sort of guy. He's going to listen. He's going to play selflessly. So yeah, we thought we'd use Cozeh. We don't have a lot of time to prepare with him, so it's going to be more on the other sort of guys to lift. But I think we'll do okay. That's it. It should be a good event for us.
Yeah, well, especially for you guys. I mean, for these past couple events, it's been a case of using a fifth and not knowing the certainty of that. I suppose coming into this Zen League event as well, how do you think that's going to affect you guys? Like, how do you think you're going to come into this tournament as opposed to if you had a solid core 5 roster for like 6 months?
Yeah. So the main thing that I've noticed with the guys not having a solid fifth is that we start really slow in games. So against Flash when it was 8-0, against the game TM last night when we were using Destiny again, because we don't have that instant gel as 5 and that, everyone plays the same as they know in practice and stuff like that, it takes us a bit longer to warm up and warm into the game as a team. So if we sort of mentally think about it a bit in the Zen matches, hopefully it doesn't affect us as much. But that's definitely a problem that I've seen that can be fixed just simply by having a core fifth, you know, a five that we crack with all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are there any sort of measures that you guys would say you're taking to make this sort of happen? I mean, you've sort of outlined what what things come with that having
Yep.
not a solid fifth. Is there anything that you guys sort of, I don't know, prepare, I guess, in that sense?
Probably just go into the games with more of a game plan in those early few rounds against teams.
Right.
So rather than sort of playing off each other, playing more standard, like you might with a normal core five,
Yeah.
we sort of want to just prepare a little bit more for those few early gun rounds, just so that win or lose, we know that it's not for any reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you have five players that commit to something and it doesn't work, they can all understand that it's like, oh, it just didn't work. Like it was the right idea, everything. They can sort of trust each other, that they're not making a wrong decision. And one thing that was really good is when we watched over the Flash games, it was really good for the guys to see how each other were dying, because it builds that trust that they're not doing dumb things and dying. Like if a guy at A sees a guy at B die, they're like, oh, you pushed, why'd you do that, or whatever. And then we watch the games together, they say they've just been like pre-fired in an off angle. Like it builds that trust between each other a lot more. So that's something that we've been working on a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose looking at the other side of Zen League, of course, there's still these Asian teams, MVP,
Yep.
PK, and Rekka. With the Asian minor not so far behind you guys, do you think your experience with teams from Asia will give you an advantage in these finals?
I think so, to be honest. So obviously they play sort of a different style of CS. They have more solid system, more idea of what they're going to do in rounds as a five on T and CT. So I think that experience of versing teams similar, like the Mongols, Flash, not so much Tyloo, but definitely those two teams. I think it will help us to know how to play against these teams.
Yeah.
And then obviously Darksider we play quite often. We know what to expect.
Yeah.
And then they know what to expect from us. So.
Well, yeah, that sort of leads me to my next question as well.
Yep.
With all the competing teams known in this event, who do you think is looking to be the most dangerous, or at least for immunity, who you're keeping a careful eye
on? Probably Darksider, to be honest.
Okay.
Obviously, we just know how they play. We know they can be a bit unpredictable. It's more sort of a slugfest, a bit more of an aim duel. So if they're really sharp on the day, it might be a bit tough if we're sort of not feeling it or something like that. Whereas I think against the other teams, they play in a way that we can handle a bit better.
Right.
But yeah, probably Darksider, to be honest. And their map pools, like the maps that they're really strong against, like strong at, we're not necessarily as strong at. So they get a bit of an advantage in those best of three vetoes that we veto one of their strong maps. They still have another strong map that we're not necessarily as good on. Whereas against the Asian teams, their map pools sort of favour us a bit better. We can sort of get the maps that we want and take away the maps that they'd like, and be comfortable.
Yeah, and I mean, that's sort of how things are going, I guess, as a whole for Zen League.
Yeah.
And then, of course, on the horizon is something pretty recent as well, which is that DreamHack Masters Malmo close qualifier, which again, immunity, Darksider are competing in.
Yep.
Yeah, have you guys, I don't know, thought much about it? Any sort of thoughts looking into this DreamHack event?
No, I think it'll be interesting. They haven't released the full list of teams yet.
Yeah, that's right.
But obviously only the winner goes through. So there's Tyloo, us, and you guys that have been named so far. So 3 strong teams. I think it'll be interesting as well. Not sure how Tyloo are online, but at LAN they seem pretty sharp, and I don't know. it should be interesting. It should be a bit of fun as well. It's always good to verse teams that you don't necessarily get to verse all the time.
Yeah.
Build your experience and your resilience as well.
Yeah, well, that's sort of something I want to sort of cover as well to not brush over, is that some generalized questions here, but in that sense, I want to talk a little bit about these international opportunities. I mean, they seem to be coming around a little bit more often, than in the past. I want to know like your opinion on that, of how these tournaments have been propping up, and especially in the example of DreamHack. Do you think this is a good thing?
Definitely. I think the more events that come up, the better. I think we're looking at maybe 4 international events over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
On the horizon easily. So, and that could be a lot more in the future. And especially if you qualify, obviously you need to win domestically to go international. The constant ESEA first place gets to go over to MDL is really good.
Yeah.
I think that that gives a lot of experience in a different region, as well as all the Asian events and even them coming here now with Zen.
Yep.
It's good. Just playing different systems, different styles, and knowing how to counter it and what to do, and then testing those theories is really good. I think it's going to increase the skill level of Australian CS, getting that experience. Because obviously, if we or you guys or anyone gets that experience, like you come back home, you play a bit different, and
right.
it increases the overall skill that we have. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, yeah, that's sort of another point as well. We've seen a lot of times, especially in the example of Vox, right, where they've gone overseas, living in NA and competing in NA. How do you feel? That sort of left Australia in a bit of a bad spot, in the sense that development to decrease, things were very slow, and now
Correct.
I believe we're starting to develop a little bit more and start reaching that stage again. In your opinion, as an individual, what do you think the key is for the Australian esports scene to sort of grow up?
Strong leaders, to be honest.
Okay.
That's the main thing that we've lacked for a very long time. Strong IGLs with clear systems, and clear ideas about the game, and conveying them to players that are willing to listen and willing to really commit to those systems and those styles. I think that's why, like, for example, Fallen was so good, and why he's made SK number 1, because he's such a strong leader, and he had 4 players on his team that were all committed.
Right.
And they came from a region where they had no international exposure, or they couldn't play against any other teams other than Brazilians. So I think that's, and look, if you look at Australis as well, how Glaive's come in and sort of changed how they play. It sort of happens in a lot of teams, to be honest, and I think that's what Australia's really missed, is those key strong IGLs who really think about the game, who are innovative, and have players that are willing to commit.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do understand we're on the clock a little bit, but we still have just a couple more questions. Won't take too much, but of course, I want to, keeping things generalized here. If someone wanted to get into the world of coaching, as you've had your experience, what do you suggest that they should do?
Just get into contact with the players, I guess. If they have any experience that's relevant, basically like a job, send in any sort of portfolio or demo or results that you might have gained. Get to know some of the top teams, top players. Ask if you could just listen into their comms, or they watch their games, and send them some feedback if they're interested or not. But again, you need those players in that team to get on board, and that's the main thing that I was worried about, was that some players might not care, or their ego is too big. But I was really lucky with Team Immunity that everyone was on board straight away, and they sort of bought in to the hierarchy of leadership that I proposed, and
Yeah, I
Feels good.
suppose it takes two to tango in a sense. I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, talking about team immunity a little bit further here, what are your goals for the second half of 2017? What is it that you as a coach want to do, and furthermore, team immunity heading into the latter half of this year?
Dominate domestically, I think, and qualify for every international event. It's pretty cliche.
Yeah.
Get a, start competing with our fifth.
Yeah.
And showing him off a little bit, showing what he can do, getting him some experience, and getting our five experience, our six of us, sorry, including me.
Yeah.
Getting us more experience at events together. But other than that, sort of just define ourselves a bit better in terms of how we view the game and how we all prioritize our things that we need to improve. Set more of a framework for the team. It's what I've been sort of trying to work on, that they have a space to bring up issues and talk about them, prioritize them, rather than just having a chit chat every now and again.
Yeah.
So I think getting that framework is really important with teams if they want to take it to that that serious step.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as one final question, I want to ask. I sort of do this, as a pattern as well. How do you see the Australian Counter-Strike scene in 2018? Where's it going to be
next year?
Yeah.
I think a lot of international events. So we're going to be getting a lot of exposure. It was pretty crazy the sort of numbers that the Asian streams were getting on the minor.
Right.
So I think the Aussie stream, like the English stream, sorry, only had maybe like 7K or 13K viewers, but some of the Asian streams were 500K a mil plus.
Wow.
And so there's that whole market as well that, in terms of sponsorship and travel opportunities, that is aware. And we sort of found out how much some of the Asian teams were on, and sort of blew us away a little bit.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Australian scene, I think if those strong leaders step forward and make themselves known, get players on board, I think if players think about what they're doing a bit more as well, try and think about the game a little bit more rather than just mindlessly pugging and mindlessly scrimming, I think it'll help.
Right.
Getting coaches maybe for their teams is sort of helpful, but I think just in terms of international events and online leagues and events in general, I think 2018 is going to be pretty busy, to be honest, for Australia.
Yeah, lots of busy bees in Counter-Strike, and
exactly.
I don't think Australia is an exception.
No, it's a good thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Magic, I want to thank you for joining me in this interview. It's been an absolute pleasure, of course. So much insight into these tournaments, and I guess that sort of comes with the bill of being a coach. But I want to thank you, of course. Do you have any words that you'd like to thank anyone, or any shout outs at all?
Just a shout out to the guys, really. Bern, Erky, Gratisfaction, Moe, for having me on, for James as well, for when he was part of the team, and Wizard for stepping in at the minor.
Yep.
And for Nath, our manager. Just a shout out to the guys, really, for having me in and treating me as family from the get-go. And I hope we get the results that we sort of deserve. We sort of get the support from IM or somewhere that we need in terms of getting those practice hours. And I'm looking forward to the next 6 months to a year plus with the guys.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you the best of luck in your endeavours with Team Immunity. But
no worries.
As far as this video goes, we're done, and I want to thank you all for watching.
I'll give my girlfriend a shout out as well.
Oh, go right ahead, my friend.
Just for the support.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for watching, and
no worries.
Hopefully we'll have a couple more videos in the future. But as far as we go, thanks for watching, everyone.